Hello everybody, welcome to Diksha Online. So now in this lecture we are going to start with a new chapter. The name of the chapter is Principles of Inheritance and Variation. In short, we can call this chapter as Genetics. Okay, so today I will be dealing with lecture 1, the first lecture in Principles of Inheritance and Variations. So let us do a quick chapter overview. We will be learning in this chapter about Mendel's laws of inheritance. So you must have learned this in your lower classes as well. Then we will learn about how a single gene is inherited using Mendel's monohybrid cross as an example, inheritance of two genes using Mendel's dihybrid cross as an example, and then we will be learning about certain phenomenon which Mendel could not explain, or we can consider it as deviation from Mendel's laws of inheritance, such as incomplete dominance, codominance, and then we will be learning about chromosomal theory, polygenic inheritance, and certain genetic phenomena such as pleiotropy. We will then be discussing about sex determination in different organisms and then mutation, and lastly we will end this chapter by learning about several types of disorders. It may be genetic disorders or it may be chromosomal disorders. So now let us begin the lecture by discussing what exactly does genetic mean. Okay, so now actually genetics is a branch of biology. It is a branch of science that deals with two major things. One is it deals with inheritance, and the second thing that genetic deals with is variations. Okay, so genetics is a branch of biology which deals with two major things. It deals with the study of inheritance and variation. Now, what do you mean by inheritance? Now, inheritance is a process. Now, you all know that how characters are passed on from one generation to the next. So, that is what is inheritance. So, it is a process by which certain characters are passed on from one generation to the next generation. For example, from parents to the offsprings. So remember the meaning of inheritance. Inheritance is a process by which characters are passed on from one generation to the next generation. When we say one generation to the next generation, we are saying from parents to the offsprings. Then, what is variation? Now, for example, all of you are sitting in the classroom and we all belong to the same species. But do we look alike? Are we similar to each other? Not entirely. We may have some similarity, but we are so unique from each other. Now, that uniqueness is referred to as variations. So, what you can say for variation is no two individuals are alike. So I hope you agree with this, except in the case of monozygotic twins or identical twins, no two individuals are alike. Now, if you remember this statement, you will understand the principle behind variations. So the fact that there are differences that exist between members of a population, members of the same species, and such differences which exist within the members of the same species is referred to as variation. So, a very simple way to put it is no two individuals are alike. Of course, there is an exception to this fact that if there are twins, if there are identical twins, then they are exactly alike each other. So there you cannot apply this particular definition. So remember this statement: no two individuals are alike, or we can say we can define variations as the differences between members of the same species. Just because we all belong to Homo sapiens, the sapien species, it doesn't mean that we all are alike. Isn't it? So there are differences that exist between the members of the same species within a population, and such differences are referred to as variations. No two individuals are alike. So in this chapter, that is the concept of genetics, basically deals with the study of two things. It studies inheritance, that is how characters are passed on. So remember the definition of inheritance. It is the process by which characters are passed on from one generation to the next generation. When I say from one generation to the next generation, I hope it is clear to all of you. We are talking about parents to offsprings, and then the offsprings will become mature, they become parents, they pass on their genes to their next, they pass on their characters to the next generation. So it is what that ensures the continuity of a species. Okay, now our ancestors several years ago, as early as about 8000 to 1000 BC, as early as this, I think humans knew about the concept of variation, that there are a lot of differences that exist in natural population of, say, animals and plants. Of course, they did not know the scientific basis of variations, which we are going to discuss now, isn't it? But they knew that sexual reproduction was creating certain variations. So please remember, our ancestors knew about variations, that are differences. And who brought forth these variations? The variations were brought forth mostly by sexual reproduction. So you all agree that in sexual reproduction, the genes get mixed. The genetic material of the mother, that is the female gamete, the genetic material of the father in the male gamete, they get mixed. And that is the product of sexual reproduction. We get a diploid zygote, and therefore the offspring has characters from both the parents. So therefore there are variations, isn't it? You know that children born to the same parents, even though they are born to the same parents, they are so different from each other. That is again because no two individuals are alike, and that is what is referred to as variations. So our ancestors knew that the secret of variations were present in the process of sexual reproduction, and that's how they saw that there was so much differences in the natural population of plants and animals. Like for example, if you take a field of plants which are all belonging to the same species, some of them are growing tall, some of them are growing dwarf, some of them are growing under extreme conditions, some of them are not growing under extreme conditions, some of them are producing lot of seeds and fruits. So these are the variations which our ancestors knew of, and they knew that these were the byproducts of sexual reproduction. Of course, they did not know the details, they did not know the scientific basis of inheritance and variation. So this is the introduction to the term genetics. So genetics deals with inheritance and variation. Inheritance is the process by which characters are passed on from one generation to another. Variations are the differences that exist between members of the same species. A phrase that is used best to describe variation is no two individuals are alike, and that is because of variation. Of course, there are exceptions to this. Okay. Now, before we get on with anything else in this chapter, because we are going to learn about something called a gene, so I want you to know about what a gene is all about before we delve much deeper in this chapter, because not learning about the gene and getting into anything in this chapter would be very, very confusing to you. So I would like to introduce you all. Now, in the first part of this chapter, we will be getting ourselves introduced to a set of terminology. In that set of terminology, the first terminology that I would like to describe is the gene. Now, you all know the architecture of a typical cell. Now, what does a typical cell have? A typical cell has a plasma membrane on its outside, and then you know that there is a nucleus, a compartment inside the cell, which is referred to as the nucleus. And all of you know that within the nucleus there is a double-stranded DNA. This is our genetic material or genome, isn't it? So I'm showing a double-stranded DNA here that is sitting inside the nucleus of our cell. Okay, now a gene is basically DNA. So all of you must remember this thing, that whenever I use the word gene, I'm talking about the double-stranded DNA, and this double-stranded DNA is sitting cozily inside a compartment that is referred to as the nucleus. So now you know that this is the DNA. Do we call the entire DNA as a gene? Now that is the question. No, we cannot call the entire stretch of DNA as the gene. See, the whole thing is DNA. The whole stretch I have shown here, it is not so small obviously in reality, The DNA is a very, very long thread-like structure which is double-stranded, okay? And we have 46 copies of DNA in our cells. We'll come to all of this later. So what is the difference between a DNA and a gene? Chemically, the gene is a DNA. It is deoxyribonucleic acid. What is a gene then? Now let me take a portion of this DNA. Let me highlight a segment of this DNA. Now I can call this small segment of DNA as a gene. Now you might ask me why I am calling this segment as a gene. What is so unique about this segment? Now I am going to tell you that this segment of the DNA, which I am going to refer to it as the gene now, it is capable of directing your cell, the cell, to make a special type of organic biomolecule. You have learned this in the chapter biomolecule. So this stretch of DNA, this segment of DNA is capable of directing. See, it doesn't get up and come out into the cytoplasm. I hope you know the space here is the cytoplasm. Okay, the DNA is sitting inside the nucleus only, it doesn't come out of it, but it sits there and it guides the synthesis of a certain biomolecule, which we refer to it as a protein. So please remember that the stretch of DNA that is capable of expressing, that is capable of synthesizing, directing the synthesis. We should not say synthesizing, because the DNA itself is not coming out of the nucleus and making the protein. It will direct the synthesis of a protein, and this stretch of DNA that is capable of directing the synthesis of protein is referred to as a gene. Now, instead of saying directs the synthesis of protein, in molecular biology we use a very simple word. We say that it codes for a specific protein. So a gene codes for a specific protein. So how do you define a gene now? Is the gene the entire DNA? No, it is a segment of DNA. Now this is a very technical definition of the gene. So I'm writing it here. A gene is defined as a segment or a part of DNA capable of coding for a protein. Remember, it is the boss. It is sitting inside the chamber, inside the nucleus, and it is directing the synthesis of a biomolecule which happens in the cytoplasm, and this biomolecule is the protein. So now you understood the very technical definition of a gene. It is, so I have highlighted this segment over here. I'm making it bolder for you. So this is a gene. It is a part of DNA. Isn't it the DNA? Isn't it nothing but the DNA? But it is not all of DNA. It is a part of the DNA. So it is a segment of the DNA which is capable of coding, meaning directing the synthesis of a particular protein. You may ask me why we are giving so much importance to this molecule that is called as protein, because you all know that what proteins can do. Proteins are the ones which are ultimately involved in expression of characters in the cell or in the whole organism. So proteins are the ones which help in expressing characters. Because all of you should remember one more thing, that majority of the enzymes that are involved in all the biochemical reactions that are happening inside the cell, you know that a biochemical reaction cannot happen without an enzyme, and majority of the enzymes are nothing but proteins. So you can imagine that these enzymes, which are proteins, can bring about changes in the chemical pathways happening in your cell, and that can reflect itself as changes in the character or the features of an organism. So a protein is ultimately responsible for expression of, it may be directly involved or it may involve many other molecules in its pathway, but a protein is a principal molecule that is involved in expressing character in a living cell, in an organism, if it is a unicellular or a multicellular, isn't it? So for example, let me take a simple character to give you an example here. Let me take the color of your eye. Color of eye. Some of us have brown color, some of us have dark brown color, some of them have blue colored eyes, some of them have green colored eyes, a shade of green. Okay, so what are these? These are the characters. I have a different eye color, you have a different eye color. Now, did you know that these eye colors are because of pigment molecules? The pigment molecules are nothing but a byproduct of what? They are a byproduct of chemical reaction inside your cell. And for those chemical reactions, you need whom? You need enzymes. And what are enzymes? 90% of all the enzymes in your cell, they are nothing but proteins. So now you know the color of your eye is because of some protein which is involved in some biochemical pathway in the cells of your iris, and that's why your iris gets imparted with a specific color. So whenever we talk about any character, it may be your skin color, it may be the height to which you grow, it may be the nature of your hair, the texture of your hair, whether your hair is straight or whether it is curled, whether your hair is dark brown, whether your hair is black, isn't it? Everything ultimately depends on a protein. So any character in the body, be it in a unicellular or a multicellular organism, is ultimately because of a protein in some biochemical pathway or some other indirect way. A protein may be involved in expression of characters. That's why we are giving so much importance to the protein over here. Okay, so please remember, a gene is a segment of DNA that is capable of coding for a protein. And what is protein responsible for? A protein is responsible for expressing character. It may express character as a component of a biochemical pathway, which is nothing but enzymes, which may modify the biochemical pathway in such a way to express certain characters or features in the organism that possesses that gene. Is it clear? So this is a very technical definition of the gene that we just got introduced to now. So I hope you all understood that DNA gene is nothing but DNA, but it is not all of DNA. It is a particular segment. The word here is important. A stretch of DNA or a segment of DNA. So gene is a particular stretch or a segment of DNA that is capable of coding or capable of directing the synthesis of a particular protein. And where does protein synthesis happen? Protein synthesis happens in the cytoplasm. Now coming to the very basic definition of a gene. If you were to learn the basic definition of the gene, it would be, it is the basic unit of inheritance. A very simple definition of a gene is, it is a basic unit of inheritance. So now you know a simpler definition also, and you know the more technical definition. It is a segment, I'm writing it here for you, a segment or stretch of DNA that codes for a specific what biomolecule? I told you, protein. And this protein molecule is capable of controlling a character, expressing a character in the living organism. So see, we have learned two definitions. One is a very basic definition. Gene is the basic unit of inheritance. The second one is a more specific definition. A segment or a stretch of DNA that codes for or that is capable of directing the synthesis of a particular protein. I gave you the example of a character, say the color of the eye, and I told you that there may be proteins involved in the expression of the color of the eye. That's why we give so much importance to protein. Ultimately, the expression of characters depends on a particular protein, and I told you that most of the cases the protein is an enzyme taking part in a biochemical pathway happening inside the cell, happening inside the body. So that is how important a gene is for our system, because if something goes wrong with the gene, there will be something wrong with the protein, and some chemical pathway will get affected in our body. Some character will become abnormal, some feature may become abnormal in the body. Okay, so this is the definition of gene. Now coming to what exactly is a character. Now, for example, since in this chapter we are all going to talk about pea plant only, mostly in the beginning of this chapter we are going to consider about pea plant. So let me take a plant, let me take a pea plant, a garden pea plant. Okay, now imagine I choose a character in this pea plant. Say for example, I choose height. How tall or how short the plant grows, that is the measure of the height of this particular plant. So remember, I am not talking about any other organism here. To make you understand with respect to pea plant, I have taken the pea plant as an example. I am considering height. Now what do you call height? Height itself is a feature of the plant, isn't it? It is something which you can observe, something which you can visibly with your eyes you can see, it is a external feature of the plant. By looking at a plant you can tell whether it is tall, whether it is dwarf, whether it is of intermediate height. So height is something which is very very evident, which is something which is an external feature. So we call such a feature as character. So height is a character. Then now you can think and tell me what are the two possibilities. I'm talking only with respect to pea plant, with respect to what you will be learning ahead in the chapter. There are two possibilities of height. One is the plant can either be tall or it can be dwarf or short. So what are the two contrasting forms of a character? The two contrasting forms of a character are either the plant can be tall or the plant can be dwarf. Now what do we call these two contrasting forms of a character, or contrasting opposites or alternatives of a character? We call them as traits. See the difference between a character and a trait. So what is a character? A character is a feature. It may be an external feature, a morphological feature. It may be an anatomical feature. It may be a physiological feature which is expressed in an organism. And now you know that a character is expressed by a gene. Then what is a trait? So I'm writing here. A trait can be defined as the contrasting forms of a particular character. So in this example, which is the character that we chose height as a character. Now what are the two possible traits, the two contrasting forms of height that is studied in pea plant with reference to this chapter? That is tall and dwarf. So tall and dwarfs are traits and height is a character. So which is more specific here? Is character specific or trait specific? Trait is more specific. So it is more specific in description, but character gives you a broader meaning. If you say character height, you're not saying which height you're talking about. But if you say tall and dwarf, you're saying exactly what height or what particular character you're speaking about, isn't it? So now think and tell me, how are tall and dwarf related to each other? Tall and dwarf are related to each other because both tall and dwarf represent the same character. Which is the character that they represent? Height. So traits represent a particular character. Traits are contrasting forms of a particular character. Now I'll give you another example to make your concept clear. Let me take eye color. And let me take blue eye and brown eye. Now tell me which is a character and which is a trait over here. Eye color is yes, you're right, the feature of your eye. The eye color is the character. It is not specific. It is just saying that the eye has a particular color. It is not saying which color. Now what are the two possible eye colors in the example I have given you? Blue eye and brown eye. So what does blue eye and brown eye both represent? The blue eye and brown eye, I am being very specific here, so that represents the trait. Blue eye color and brown eye color are forms of eye color. They are alternate forms. They are contrasting forms of the same character. So whenever we have contrasting forms of a particular character, we refer to them as traits. They are more specific in comparison to, in description. They are more specific in description in comparison to character. Did you understand what I am trying to tell you here? So height is the character, tall and dwarf, which are forms of height, contrasting forms of a particular character, which is height, are referred to as traits. Okay? So now coming to alleles. Now let me again give you the same example here. I am going to say height. What is height? Yes, you are right. Height is a character. Now I'm going to write down the definition of a character here. A character is any feature. When I say any feature, it may be external or it may be internal. Any external or internal feature which is mostly heritable, means it can be passed on to the next generation or it can be inherited from the previous generation. So any feature that is external or internal, it may be appearance, it may be inside the body some feature, it may be some biochemical feature, it may be some functional physiological feature, it may be some cellular feature. So external or internal feature which is mostly heritable is referred to as, not, when I say mostly heritable, not in all cases, mostly it can be passed on from one generation to another. That is called as a character. And then I took two examples here. I said height of a pea plant. Remember, I am talking only with respect to pea plant to make things easier for you. Height of a pea plant may be of two types. One is called tall and one is called dwarf. Two contrasting forms of the height. So what are these two contrasting forms of a character called? We call them as traits. Okay, now from the beginning we have been telling that any character, what do you need for a character to express? You need a gene, because I told you a gene is a segment of DNA that codes for a protein which in turn expresses a character. So there should be a gene for the tall trait. There should be a gene for the dwarfness. So let me call the gene which controls, or the gene that is responsible for the expression of tall trait is capital T. Okay, and the gene that is responsible for the trait of dwarf, I'm going to call it small t. So I've given it my own notation here. These are the standard notations which we are going to follow throughout the chapter when we learn about pea plants, inheritance in pea plants. So the gene that is coding for tall, which is coming under the character height, is capital T. The gene that is responsible for dwarfness, which is a character of height, again dwarfness is a form of height, is small t. So there are two genes with me. How many genes do I have? Two genes with me. Now can you tell me how these two genes are dissimilar and how they are similar? So I am going to write here the genes capital T and small t, capital T and small t are similar because ultimately what do they control? See, capital T controls tallness, which is different from dwarfness, but broadly speaking, what do they control? They are similar because they control or they code for the same character. Yes or no? Both of them are associated with the character of height. So in brackets, I'm going to write height. But are they exactly similar to each other? No, they are dissimilar also. Why are they dissimilar? Because they code for the same character. But that doesn't mean they're exactly alike. There is some dissimilarity in them because they code for different, I should use a different word here, traits. One of them is responsible for tall and one of them is responsible for dwarfness. So what do we call such genes? Capital T and small t. So this is also a gene. This is also a gene. How are they similar? They are similar because they code for the same character, which is the character height. How are they dissimilar? They are dissimilar because they are unique. Capital T codes for the trait of tallness and small t codes for a trait of dwarfness. So what do we call such genes? Such genes are called alleles. So capital T and small t are alleles of each other. Why are they called alleles of each other? Because they are genes. Basically both are genes, but are they entirely similar? No. They are not entirely similar, but they do share a similarity. What is the similarity they share? They express the same They code for the same character. Then you will say they are not entirely similar. Why? Because they code for different traits. So what do you call such genes which code for the same character but contrasting pair of traits? One of them codes for tallness, one of them codes for dwarfness. We call them as alleles or allelomorphs. So I will write the definition here. Alleles or allelomorphs are, they are slightly different forms of a gene. They are slightly different forms of a gene that express a pair of contrasting traits. What are the two traits here? One is tall and one is dwarf. So this is the definition of an allele. They are slightly different forms of the same gene that express a pair. They express the same character. We are all talking about one and only character here. Height. From the beginning we are talking only about height. But one of them is responsible for a trait of tall. I told you tall and dwarf are contrasting forms of a character which are called traits. There is a gene capital T for tall. There is a gene small t for dwarf. How are they related? They are related, they are similar because they code for the same character. How are they dissimilar? They are dissimilar because they code for contrasting pair of traits. One of them codes for tall, one of them codes for dwarf. But they are related. So what do we call such related genes, capital T and small t? We call them as alleles. Another term for alleles as mentioned in the heading is allelomorphs. They are slightly different forms of the same gene. I will write here you write same gene of the same gene. There are slightly different forms of the same gene that express a pair of, that control a pair of contrasting traits. So again you can take the analogy of blue eye and brown eye. For example, so which are the alleles for eye color now? If there is eye color, this is just for your understanding. Let me say blue eye is let me give the notation of capital B to blue eye, and let me give the notation of small b to brown eye. Okay, now you answer my question. How are capital B and small b related? Because they both control the same character. How are they not entirely similar? Because they both control contrasting pair of traits. So when you have two genes like this which control the same character but contrasting pair of traits, we call these two genes as what? We call them as alleles. So alleles are capital B and small b. Like how in pea plant it was capital T and small t. In eye color, the example that I have given you here, it is capital B and small b. So please go through it again. If you have doubts, you can rewind it and watch it again. But the basic idea is, now we have learnt about, what did we learn in the previous slide? We learnt about character and trait. I told you character is a broader term and trait is more specific. If I say character height, I am not saying which height I am talking about. So it is a broader term. Trait is something I'm being very specific, tall or dwarf I'm saying. Like how if I say eye color, I'm not saying which color. But if I say blue or brown color, I'm mentioning the trait. So what is a trait? It is a contrasting form, alternative forms of a particular character. In the next slide, I gave you the definition of character. A character is any feature. It may be an external feature or it may be an internal feature which is mostly heritable, which can be passed on from one generation to another. And we know that traits are contrasting forms of a character. So height is the character. What are the two forms of height? Tall and dwarf. So tall and dwarf are the traits. I told you that tall is controlled by a gene. By now you know what a gene is. It is a stretch of DNA that is capable of coding for a protein, which in turn can code for a trait or a character. Tall is controlled by a gene called capital T. Dwarf is controlled by a gene called small t. Capital T and small t genes are related because they control the same character. They express the same character. They code for the same character. But they are dissimilar because they code for contrasting forms of, or they code for a pair of contrasting traits. One codes for height, one codes for tall, one codes for the opposite trait, that is dwarf. So see the definition of such genes. Such genes which are slightly different forms of each other, which are slightly different forms of a single gene that express a pair of contrasting traits are referred to as alleles, that code for a pair of contrasting traits. That is tall and dwarf. In the other example I gave you, I took the example of eye color, that is blue and brown. Okay, so now the take home message here is capital T and small t are related, not entirely related, not entirely unrelated. They're related because capital T and small t control the same character, height. They're not entirely related because capital T controls tall and small t controls dwarf. Such genes which control pairs of contrasting traits are called alleles or allelomorphs. Okay. Now coming to locus. I told you about alleles now in the pea plant. What were the two alleles that I spoke about in the pea plant for height? If I consider the height of a pea plant, I told you there are two alleles. One is capital T and one is small t. Where are these alleles located? By now you know allele is nothing but a gene. But they are genes which control contrasting pairs of traits. So they are nothing but DNA. Capital T is also a gene. Small t is also gene. Then why give it a new term called alleles? To suggest that they control the same character but they control contrasting traits. So where are these genes located? I told you they are located inside the DNA. In the DNA, they are the DNA located inside the nucleus. But you all know that generally the DNA is not in the form of a thread-like structure. It organizes itself into rod-shaped structures during cell division, which are called as chromosomes. So a chromosome is basically nothing but DNA. It is made up of highly wound and tightly packaged DNA molecule. Somewhere on this chromosome, the allele is present. Say for example, if I draw an imaginary position here, if I put a bar like this and if I write capital T, what am I suggesting? I am suggesting that on this point on the chromosome, the allele capital T is located. Now say in the other chromosome also, I draw a similar imaginary line and if I write small t, then you mean to say that in this position on the chromosome, small t is located. You can't see this obviously. Can you see the gene on the DNA? Gene is chemically DNA. It's not like there is a capital T and small t sticking out of it. It's not like that if you look at it under the microscope, nature has given it a label of capital T, small t. All this we have done for our convenience. You can't see it under the microscope. So it is purely hypothetical. You can't be very sure where a gene is located. But theoretically, the point on the chromosome where a gene is located, where an allele is located, is referred to as locus. So I'm writing the definition here. Locus means the point on a chromosome where a gene, by now you should know the difference between gene and allele. They are all used interchangeably, but the only thing is, when will you call two genes as alleles? They should express contrasting traits of a particular character. Tall, dwarf, height, remember that. Tall and dwarf, capital T and small t are alleles. Why? Because they are related. They control the same character. They are not entirely the same because they control opposite traits. Such genes are called alleles. So the point on a chromosome where a gene or allele is located, see, locus, location, located, is referred to as A locus, the point on the chromosome where a particular gene or allele is located, is referred to as locus. Is this clear to all of you? What are homologous chromosomes? Let me again take a pea plant, because we are learning only about pea plants here. In a cell of a pea plant has many uncountable infinite number of cells in it. Okay, so I have taken only one cell, and this cell happens to be diploid. Diploid means it has two sets of chromosomes. What do you mean by two sets of chromosomes? That means it is a product of gamete fusion. One of the sets came from One set came from male gamete, the paternal set, and one set came from the female gamete, that is the maternal set. So whenever you hear about diploid, you have to remember a diploid cell is a product of fusion of gametes, because it has two sets of chromosome. Who brought one set? The sperm brought one set. Who brought the other set? The egg brought the other set. Because the two sets came together, this cell now has two sets of chromosomes. We call it as a diploid cell. In the cell of a pea plant, in the nucleus of a pea plant, there are totally 14 chromosomes. Very less. Yes or no? In humans, we have how many chromosomes in our diploid cell? We also come from the fusion of sperm and egg. We have 46 chromosomes. That means how much did the sperm bring? 23. And how much did the egg bring? 23. So we have cells which have 46, double set. In a pea plant, the nucleus has 14 chromosomes. Nucleus of which cell? A diploid cell. How are these 14 chromosomes arranged? These 14 chromosomes are arranged in pairs. During cell division, mostly they form pairs. So how many pairs? Let me show you a few pairs. First pair, second pair, third pair. Till how many pairs should I draw? I will draw the last one, seventh pair. So how many pairs are there? 7 pairs of chromosomes. Why 7 pairs? Because 7 pairs makes up a diploid number of 14. How many ever is the diploid number, accordingly the pairs will be formed, mostly during cell division. So now can you tell me a human cell has how many such pairs of chromosomes? We have 23 pairs. How did you know? Because we have a total of 46 chromosomes. Because we have a total of 46 chromosomes, we have how many pairs? 23 pairs. Now this is a pea plant. So I am showing only a few pairs here. This is the first pair. And this is a second pair. And this is a third pair. Fourth pair, fifth pair, sixth pair, and lastly, seventh pair. So there are totally 7 pairs of chromosomes. What do we call such a pair of chromosomes? We call such a pair as homologous pair. See the heading, homologous chromosomes. So such paired chromosomes are called homologous pair of chromosomes. So how many homologous pairs does pea plant have? 7 homologous pairs. How many homologous pairs do we have? 23 homologous pairs. Did you understand? And now let us take any one pair for example, and let me show alleles on that pair. For example, if I use the character height, again I am talking about the character height. Can you all name the 2 genes for height in pea plant? Capital T, small t. What does capital T control? Capital T codes for tall and small t codes for dwarf. What do we call capital T and small t? They are genes, but since they code for contrasting pair of traits, we call them as alleles. So in a diploid cell which has pairs of chromosomes, you can find a maximum of 2 alleles for a character. Why only 2 alleles you can find? Why not more than 2 alleles? Because Generally, the alleles occupy one of the homologous pairs. Now, all of you focus on the first homologous pair here. Let me show capital T is sitting on one member, small t is sitting on the other member. And did you notice that their positions are the same? They are present in the same corresponding positions on this pair of chromosome. And once they have occurred in this pair, they will not again occur in any other pair. In a pair, how many are there? 2 chromosomes are there. So a 2 chromosomal pair can have how many alleles on it? A maximum of 2 alleles. Why a maximum of 2? Because in this cell, the chromosomes are found in pairs. Why pairs? Because that's how it is in diploid organisms. Always remember, such homologous pairs where 2 chromosomes come together and form a pair during cell division, it is found only in diploid organisms. In haploid cell, you will not find this pairing because haploid cell has only one set of chromosomes. No pairing can happen. Pairing can happen only when there are 2 sets. One of them is brought by the sperm and one of them is brought by the egg. So why can't we have more than 2 copies of capital T and small t, for example? Because if I draw it somewhere else like this, I cannot draw it anywhere else. Once I have shown it in a pair, once it occurs in a homologous pair, it cannot repeat again in another pair. And in a pair, there are 2 chromosomes. So at a given point of time, you will only find a maximum of 2 alleles occupying what? Occupying a homologous pair of chromosomes. Did you understand? So what is a homologous pair? Chromosomes which come together and form a pair. And do you know why these pairs are formed like this? First pair, second pair. Now for example, let me call this pair as A and A dash. The question is, why did A form a pair with A dash? That is because A and A dash are 2 chromosomes which are genetically, they are somewhat similar. So they share a level of, genetically they are identical, or they share a level of similarity in terms of their genetic constitution. That's why they have come together and formed a pair. So who will form a pair? Only if there is some genetic, if they share a genetic, they are genetically identical, they share genetic similarity, then only they come together and they form a pair. How many pairs in the pea plant? 7 pairs. On how many pairs can the alleles occur for a particular character? Here I took for the character height. For the character height, you can have only 2 alleles. Why only 2? Because in a pair only it can occur. It cannot repeat again. And in a pair you have how many chromosomes? 2 chromosomes. So 2 alleles can occur at the maximum on one homologous pair. Did you understand? So homologous chromosomal concept is clear with this. Please go through it again if you have any confusion. Okay. Now let us see what is the condition homozygous and heterozygous. I told you that alleles occupy a homologous pair. So let me draw a homologous pair. Let me draw another pair in another pea plant. Different pea plants I am talking about here. So say this is pea plant 1. And this is pea plant 2. Now see how I will show the arrangement of the allele. In pea plant 1, in one homologous pair, one of the member has capital T and the other member also has capital T. Whereas in pea plant 2, one of the member has capital T in a homologous pair. Remember, I am talking about this pair. But this is not the same pea plant, because in a pea plant you can have a maximum of 2 alleles controlling a character because they are diploid. In pea plant 2, see the difference. One member is capital T present on the locus, the other member is small t. See the difference between the two. In the first case, both the alleles, which I have shown here, both the alleles are, what are they? They are alike. Capital T, capital T. In the second case, both the alleles occupying a homologous pair are unlike. One of them is capital T, one of them is small t. Can you think of another possible combination? There can be another P plant, say for example P plant 3, which has a homologous pair like this, and say it has small t on one member and small t on the other member. So again you see the pairs and tell me the allelic pairs which are located on the homologous pairs or the homologous chromosome. Are they unlike or alike? They are alike. This condition where the allelic members located on a homologous pair are alike, we call this condition as homozygous. And what if the allelic members are unlike? Then we call the condition as heterozygous. Did you understand? So in homozygous, you please write down the definition. Let me try to put it in a very simpler way to you. Okay, here you write the allelic members of a pair are alike. In an organism, we say that homozygous is a condition in which the allelic members of a pair are alike. Then how do you define heterozygous? It is a condition in which the allelic members of a pair are unlike. They are different from each other. And what is the example for homozygous? For homozygous, you can give two examples, capital T, or small t, small t. For heterozygous, you can give one example, capital T, small t. So now you know that alleles occupy homologous chromosomes. And when the alleles which are present in a homologous pair, when the allelic members, the condition in which the allelic members on the homologous pair are alike, we call it as homozygous. The condition in which the allelic members of a pair are unlike, we call it as heterozygous. Like for example, both are capital T, they are alike. Here one is capital T, one is small t. The pair is unlike, so heterozygous. Here one is small t, the other member has small t, the pair are alike, so it is homozygous. And what are we talking? What are such pairs called? Such paired chromosomes, I am repeating again, please remember, such pairs of chromosomes, I hope you remember, they are called homologous pairs. When do they pair like this? Homologous pairs are found in which organisms? They are found in diploid cells of diploid organisms. And when do they form such pairs? When do they become prominent? During cell division. And why have two chromosomes come together and paired? Because they are genetically identical. Okay? So in a pair, if the allelic members are alike, the condition is homozygous. When the allelic members of a pair are unlike, then we call the condition as heterozygous. Capital T and small t are example for homozygous. See here I have written homozygous, where both are alike. And capital T and small t is an example for heterozygous, where the members of the allelic pair or the allelic members of the pair are unlike. Okay, so go through the concept again and note down the definition. You will understand it. Now, what is a homozygous? A homozygous plant is also said to be pure or true breeding. For example, if I take a plant that is capital T, that means you have to imagine that in one of the homologous pairs, this should be a thought flow. The moment you see capital T written on the paper, you have to conjure up a pair of chromosomes. And then you have to call them as homologous pairs. And then immediately mentally you must remember one of them has capital T on its locus, in the same corresponding locus, in the same position in the neighboring member of the pair, there is capital T. So without Any confusion? The moment you see capital T written on paper, you have to mentally conjure up the image of a chromosomal pair with capital T on both. This is homozygous. Now, such a plant which is homozygous, say for example, it is homozygous tall. So, let me write here, it is homozygous tall. Why is it tall? Because we saw that capital T is a gene that controls the character of height but the trait of tallness. It is a gene that codes for tallness. It is a gene that expresses the trait of tallness. So, capital T I have written. Now, if this plant, no matter how many ever times you self-pollinate it, usually for true breeding we say that on self-pollination, if it undergoes self-pollination, is it possible for you to suddenly get a plant which is dwarf? Impossible, because both the allelic members are capital T. The seed produced also will be capital T. Again you self-pollinate it. So self-pollination, let me abbreviate it as SF. Again you self-pollinate it. Dwarfness cannot creep in because the available alleles are only capital T, and you're not crossing it with some other plant. You are just collecting the pollen on its own. It's happening obviously. Pollen of a flower is deposited onto the stigma of the same flower. There is no chance of a cross pollen coming in. So how many ever times this plant undergoes self-pollination, all the resulting plants will be what? Tall, and tall. So all of them will be homozygous tall, homozygous tall, homozygous tall, and homozygous tall. Such a plant is said to be pure breeding, because don't you think this plant over many generations, let me write it here, over several generations of self-pollination. What did you notice over many generations of self-pollination, which are a product of self-pollination? This plant has remained faithful. What has it remained faithful to? Remained faithful to tallness. It is not budging from the trait of tallness. It wants to be tall only, because the only alleles it has with it are tall alleles, capital T alleles. So don't you think the plant is faithful to tallness? Or we can say it is true to tallness. Now, for example, you have a principle in life. You are always saying truth. That means you are pure, you are faithful, you are true to that character. You will not budge from that character even if the conditions outside become unfavorable or if they become hostile to you. Similarly, this plant, how many ever generations you self-pollinate it, it is only expressing tallness. It is very faithful to tallness because it is homozygous. And such a plant which is true to a trait, which is pure at its heart, meaning it is faithful to a particular trait, is said to be pure breeding or true breeding. When I say pure and true, don't write pure at heart and all that. That is just for your understanding. What is pure and true breeding? Pure for a character or a trait, true to a character or trait. It is true towards tallness. It is pure for tallness. It is faithful for tallness, because it will never express dwarfness throughout the generations of self-pollination. It is only expressing tallness. Such a condition, a homozygous condition. Can you recall the definition of homozygous? When the allelic members of the pair are alike, capital T, that is called homozygous. Now you know why we call homozygous plants as pure breeding or true breeding, because they are faithful to this particular trait, they are true to this particular trait, they are pure for this particular trait. Is that clear? So pure breeding line, just now I told you, you start with a homozygous plant, capital T. self-pollination, again you get capital T, capital T. Self-pollination, again you get capital T, capital T. Self-pollination, capital T, capital T. Self-pollination, capital T, capital T. Actually, you should do this for 6 to 8 times. So this is first generation, generation 1, generation 2, generation 3, generation 4, and you have to repeat this for generation 5, capital T, capital T, generation 6, capital T, capital T. So now you have a population of plants. How many plants do you have with you? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You have a population of 7 plants, and you obtained them through what process? You obtained them through self-pollination. For how many generations? For 6 to 8 generations. And are they budging from expressing tallness? No, they are faithful to tallness. So they are exhibiting a stable inheritance and expression of a trait which is tallness. Such a group of plants is referred to as a pure breeding line. So how did you create this pure breeding line? By continuously self-pollinating it for 6 to 8 generations. And what is the feature of a pure breeding line? They exhibit stable inheritance and expression of a trait throughout several generations, and they have been repeatedly self-pollinated. This is called a pure breeding line. So a pure breeding line consists of, so please write here, a pure breeding line consists of plants that have been self-pollinated repeatedly. So it consists of plants that have been self-pollinated and exhibit stable inheritance and expression of a character, to be very, very specific, trait over several generations. You had to self-pollinate them for many 6 to 8 and more sometimes. So this pure breeding line has plants which have been repeatedly self-pollinated, and no matter how many times you self-pollinate them, they will express a stable inheritance. They will exhibit stable inheritance and expression of character or trait. They will always express tall, because I started with a homozygous tall plant. Please remember, imagine if I started with small t, what would happen? All the plants would be small t. Such a group of plants, such a line, a group which is consisting of plants that have been repeatedly self-pollinated, and they exhibit the same stable inheritance and expression of a character over what? Not just one generation, over 6 to 8 or more generations, is called a pure breeding line. So it's basically a family of plants. Line means a group of plants. Imagine there are many plants. You've made them stand in a line. So like that you can remember it's a group of plants which are made up of those plants which have been obtained, which have been self-pollinated repeatedly, and throughout the generations they're expressing the same trait and character. In this example, they're expressing the same trait or character, which is tallness. I hope it is clear to you. So you are continuously self-pollinating. What is the reason for this stable inheritance and expression? The reason is they are pure breeding. Pure breeding means they are heterozygous or homozygous? Homozygous, because they have both alleles which are alike, capital T and capital T. Okay? Genotype versus phenotype. Now, genotype is the actual Please remember the definition: actual genetic constitution. This is something that you cannot see with your naked eye. How can you see and tell which gene a plant has? You cannot. So this actual genetic constitution of an organism is called its genotype. But how do you know? How can you guess which genotype it has, which gene it has? For example, if a plant is tall, you know that it has capital T gene in it. How do you know it is tall? Because you can see with your eyes. That is called phenotype. So phenotype is something that is a visible or observable expression of a trait. This you can see with your naked eye, phenotype. You look at a plant, you know that it is tall or dwarf. Yes or no? So that's why that is phenotype, which is visible or observable. When you look at a plant, if you don't know what its phenotype is, you cannot tell its genotype. Sometimes even if you know the phenotype, much later we will see, you cannot see the genotype, because genotype is the actual gene. I just told you there are no labels. You can't see labels under the microscope like capital T, small t. This is all for our convenience. So what you can't see is its actual gene, what is there on the chromosome. So this actual genetic constitution of an organism is called genotype, whereas what you can see, oh, this plant is tall. Tallness is a phenotype. This plant is dwarf. Dwarfness is a phenotype. This plant has red flowers. You can see that it is red flowers. That is phenotype. But you can't see which is the gene responsible for red flowers. Isn't it? So visible or observable expression of a trait is called phenotype. Hybridization and hybrid. Now, for example, I will give you a very simple example for hybridization. Say, for example, I take a tall pea plant and I cross it with a dwarf pea plant. This is called hybridization. Why am I calling this as hybridization? Because I have chosen two parents, a cross between two, mostly they should be pure breeding parents. That means this should be capital T homozygous. This should be small t homozygous. So a cross between two pure breeding parents differing in one or more pairs of contrasting traits. Now how are these two differing from each other? They differ in one pair. They differ from each other in one pair of contrasting traits. Which is that one pair of contrasting traits? Tall, dwarf. Isn't it a pair? Tall and dwarf are a pair of contrasting traits. It can be more than one as well, not just one. More than one pair of contrasting traits. Such a cross where both the parents are not exactly alike. They may differ in one or more pairs of contrast. The classical example of hybridization is take a tall pea plant, cross it with a dwarf pea plant. Tell me which character do they differ in? How many characters? One character, height. How many traits? One pair of traits. Tall and dwarf are traits, height is a character. So it is not necessarily one, it may be more than one. So how do you define hybridization? Please write down: cross between two pure breeding, meaning homozygous parents, capital T, small t, differing in one or more pairs of contrasting traits. And what do you call an offspring of such a hybridization? After you conduct a cross, you will get an offspring. The offspring obtained by hybridization is called hybrid. The product of hybridization is referred to as the hybrid. So you have crossed two homozygous, because I have taken capital T, small t, two homozygous parents which are differing in this case, they differ in only one pair of contrasting, but it can be more than one as well. Differing in one or more pairs of contrasting traits is referred to as hybridization. What is monohybridization? In monohybridization, the parents differ only in one pair of contrasting traits. In dihybridization, they differ in more than one, that is two pairs of contrasting traits. See the difference? Which is the example that I gave you here? Tall versus dwarf. Character is one, height. But how many pair of traits? Two traits. One is tall and one is dwarf. When a cross involves two parents differing in only one pair of contrasting traits, we call such a cross as monohybridization. The offspring is called monohybrid. Now I'll give you another example for two pairs of contrasting traits. Let me take a pea plant which has yellow seed or yellow and round seed is crossed with a plant which has green and wrinkled seed. Why is this a dihybrid cross? All of you please think and tell me. Because what are the two pairs of traits? Yellow and green is one pair of trait concerning the character of color of the seed. Round and wrinkled is the second pair of contrasting trait concerning the character of shape of the seed. So two pairs of contrasting traits means we are taking into consideration two characters over here. What are the two characters? One is the seed color and one is the seed shape. So how do these two parents differ from each other? Do they differ in only one pair of traits? No, two pair of traits. Yellow and green, round and wrinkled. Two pair of traits means how many characters? Two characters. What are the two characters? Seed shape and seed color. So when a cross is conducted between two purebred parents differing in two pairs of contrasting traits, then we call it as a dihybridization. See the difference? In monohybridization, the parents differ in one pair of traits. In dihybridization, the parents differ in two pairs of traits. In monohybridization, you are taking one character, height. In dihybridization, because there are two pairs of traits, you have taken two characters, seed shape and seed color. The offspring of a monohybridization cross is a monohybrid. The offspring of a dihybridization cross is a dihybrid. Isn't it? Now moving on to Gregor Johann Mendel. Now all this boils down to, we learnt all these terminology. It is possible because of the work conducted by a famous geneticist, the father of genetics, Gregor Johann Mendel. Gregor Johann Mendel was born in 1822 and he actually worked extensively on pea plants. He was living in a monastery. He was a school teacher and living in a monastery, okay, in Brunn of the Czech Republic, okay, it's known as Brunn in German. And in this place he was living in a monastery as a schoolmaster. He was principally teaching physics in the school, but in his garden in the monastery there was garden pea plants that were growing, which fascinated him a lot because they expressed a lot of contrasting traits. He saw some pea plants were tall, some were dwarf, some had violet flowers, some had white flowers, some had green pods, some had yellow pods. Some had flowers at the tip, some had flowers at the axil. So that's why he was very fascinated by it and he worked on the pea plant. He worked for 7 years between 1856 to 1863 on pea plants. Please remember, they will ask you to mention the years, to state the years between which Gregor Johann Mendel worked on his famous pea plant experiments. So he worked in the mid-19th century, 1856 to 1863. Later, he published his work in 1866. However, his work was not taken very seriously. Now, that story we will discuss in the future lectures. But for now, you should remember why Mendel was hugely successful in his work. Because first of all, Mendel studied mathematics and physics, and so he used a lot of statistics in his work. So he used statistics plus mathematical logic in his work that made his work more reliable, which scientists of those times were against it. They were not supposed to use maths in biology. Okay, but he used statistics and mathematical logic. He worked with a large number of plants, so he had a large sampling size. Whenever there is more number, you work with more number of plants, your results become more credible. So this contributed towards credibility of his results. And he also confirmed whatever inferences he made. He didn't blindly make conclusion and inferences. He confirmed his inferences on all the experiments that he performed in successive generation of plants. So whenever he confirmed his inferences, his data or his results was very reliable. His results were reliable and they pointed towards universally applicable, means which are the universal truths, universally applicable laws of inheritance. So he didn't just blindly make conclusions, he confirmed whatever inferences he made by working with plants with for many generations. He confirmed them with another set of experiments which made his results reliable, and they pointed towards a universally applicable laws of inheritance than just being a bunch of data which didn't have any confirmation. So he used statistics and mathematical logic. He chose a large sampling size. He worked with lot of plants, and that provided credibility to his results. And whatever inferences he made by conducting experiments on plants, he confirmed those inferences with again by conducting experiments, so that it was whatever he concluded was universally applicable, and it was not just a bunch of unconfirmed or unsubstantiated data. Okay, this is why Gregor Johann Mendel was extremely successful in performing garden pea plant experiments. And later, when his work was discovered and he got due credit for his work, sadly he had passed away by then, but then he came to be known as the father of genetics. What characters did he study in pea plants? He studied 7 contrasting pairs of pea plants. So what we are going to do now is we are going to write the character in first column, and then we will write the traits. I hope you know the alternate or the contrasting forms of a character are called traits. And traits, you will later understand what is a dominant trait and what is a recessive trait. Okay, so the 7 characters that he studied and the respective contrasting pairs of traits that he studied in the garden pea plants, I'm going to write it for you here. First, he studied, it's not in a specific order, so let us write height. He studied the height of pea plant. He saw the dominant trait was tall, the recessive trait was dwarf. See, tall and dwarf are 2 forms of the same character. In the beginning itself, I told you the contrasting forms of a character are referred to as traits. Okay, then he studied the flower position. The second one is flower position. Dominant was axial, meaning it was borne at the branches at the angle of the branch and the mother axis. Terminal, meaning it was borne at the end of the shoot. Axial was dominant and terminal was recessive. Dominant and recessive are concepts we will introduce ourselves to later, but for now remember the traits I'm mentioning here. Flower position may be axial or it may be borne at the tip of the stem, that is terminal. Okay, then flower color. The third character he studied was flower color. The dominant color was violet or purple. The recessive color was white. Okay, then he studied the seed color. Yellow was dominant and green was recessive. Then he studied the seed shape of the pea plant, which occurred in two alternate forms or two contrasting forms. Round was dominant and wrinkled was recessive. Then he studied the pod color. You know that in pea there is a pod. Inside the pod the pea seeds are there, isn't it? So this is called the pod. So pod color was dominant was green and recessive was yellow. It's opposite to the seed color. And pod shape, dominant was inflated and recessive was constricted. Inflated means the boundary of the pod, you could not tell the boundary of the seeds, you could not find the impression of the seeds on the surface because the pod is bloated or inflated. In constricted, the surface of the pod bears the impressions of the seeds that are present inside. Okay, so inflated and constricted. So these are the 7 characters or 7 pairs of contrasting traits. Traits are alternate or contrasting forms of the same character: height, flower position, flower color, seed shape, pod color, pod shape. They will ask you this for a 3 or a 5 mark question. You have to learn all the 7 characters and the respective traits. Remember, we will move to the concept of dominant and recessive in the upcoming lectures. So what did we learn today? We introduced ourselves to the field of genetics. We learned n number of terminology like gene, character, trait, allele, locus, homologous chromosome, homozygous, heterozygous, pure breeding line, genotype, phenotype, hybridization. We learnt about Gregor Johann Mendel. We learnt why he was so successful in his work, and like I said, he was not recognized, that comes later, but he was successful in his work. And we learnt about the 7 pairs of contrasting traits studied by Mendel in pea plant. Homework is you need to define the gene, mention the years during which Mendel worked on pea plant, state any 3 pairs of contrasting traits studied by Mendel in the pea plant. You can draw a table and mention the 3 pairs of traits out of the 7 pairs. List out the reasons why Mendel was successful and define the following terms: gene, allele, homozygous, heterozygous, pure breeding line. Each definition carries 1 mark. So with this, we conclude lecture 1 in Principles of Inheritance and Variations. Thank you.